Welcome to Filmstrip, movie reviews presented by Continuous Play Podcast. These podcasts are spoiler-filled as we discuss the plots, characters, and themes of the films in review. All content used or discussed in these podcast episodes is the property of the respective owners and used under the Fair Use Act, Section 504, C2, Title 17.
Welcome to Filmstrip. I'm Jay.
And I'm Ron.
And this is our review of Stephen King's Thinner, starring Robert John Burke, Joe Mantegna, Lucinda Jenny, Michael Constantine, Kari Wuhrer, and Bethany Joey Lentz. Directed by Tom Holland, released in 1996 on a budget of $14 million, grossed $15.3 million at the box office. Now, first things up here, I want to say, we've done a selected works of Stephen King retrospective. Nick and I did 10 of those back a few years ago, and this doesn't really fit in that category because the odd part of this film for me, among other things, is that it's billed as Stephen King's Thinner, but the book is a Richard Bachman book, which, if you don't know, was Stephen King's pseudonym or whatever. So I always found that amusing, and I wanted to start there with you on that. Had you ever read the book or had any connection to it before this film?
Yes, actually, I have read all the Richard Bachman books before he resumed using the pen name for other things. They all came in like a 4-for-1 big hardback that I must have picked up from my local library. So I was familiar with the book and was well prepared for the ridiculousness of the movie.
See, that's good for you. I have only read one Bachman book ever, and that was The Running Man. And I had read it years after I'd seen the Schwarzenegger film, and I would contend that if you can look at both as different pieces of work, you can enjoy both. But I've always wanted to know if they could ever make The Running Man the way it was written in that book, because if you haven't read it, folks, it's much darker and nihilistic, and it's kind of cool, actually, and oddly prophetic for today's entertainment culture. But Arnold Schwarzenegger was a very different cat back then. But no, I didn't know anything about this one. So when it came out, I didn't see it in theaters. I do remember renting it on, I think, VHS or this. Yeah, this was way before my DVD days. So I remember renting this when I was in college and watching it, and just I've only seen it once, other than the viewing for this time, and it's streaming on Netflix. I think it's been out there for a while, so I knew I had seen it. But moreover, I was attracted to it because I found out who the director was. Tom Holland, Child's Play, Fright Night, sign me up, baby. I love those and love those series, even the really weird, off-putting sequels that both have. I liked those tremendously, so I was interested in seeing it, if nothing more than just for him.
I actually own this on DVD somewhere. It was in a box set of junk I bought at Walmart because it had like 5 Stephen King stories in it. And the reason I bought it was because it cost like $2 more than just buying a standalone DVD copy of The Stand. But The Stand was one of the things that was in this box set. It was like The Stand and Golden Years and this and some other lesser lights. I
think I have one of those that like includes Storm of the Century, which is like 40 hours long, and then like 10 other movies too that I bought for $3 once or something.
Yeah. Oh, the other one was The Langoliers, which is the other reason I bought it.
Oh, was that the Jimmy Smits thing?
I don't think Jimmy Smits was in it, but like Bronson Pinchot is playing like
there we go. Yeah.
Yes, a violently coked up yuppie.
Or Stephen King in the 80s. So.
Right. I'm a big fan of Tom Holland. I actually rewatched Child's Play not too long ago, and it still holds up pretty well. So I don't know if this feels like feels as much like a Tom Holland joint as I would like it to, but I really was excited when I realized, hey, he's that guy, and he was the actual director of this thing.
Yeah, I'm you can't find much about what Stephen King thinks about this on the internet. I've never seen, his take on most of this. He tends to trash a lot of the films, or at least, talk about what he thinks doesn't work in them. And there's a set of Stephen King adaptations that I put in like the B and C class, like Graveyard Shift and this, and, some of the other ones that work and then really don't work and stuff like that. And, Nick and I covered some of those back in the day too. And I've always felt like this one was definitely in there, but Tom Holland hates this, and he will tell you he hates it and talks about the studio's interference in it and all this. And that's funny to me because he's someone who rarely works without having a ton of say in what he does. And I feel like he's all over this film. And just at the end of it, he realized, no, this is just a piece of crap, and he hated it. I don't know. It's, well, we can get into it when we get into it. I mean, it's a set of very oddly strung together scenes and characters that I don't even know who you're supposed to like in this. There's no one to root for at all. It's very mean film.
I think the only person you could root for is Joe Mantegna.
Honestly, that may be correct because he is one of my favorite character actors. But we'll get into him. Why don't you kick it off with a plot summary, though, man? For those who don't know, give us a swing at what Thinner is all about.
Oh, if you don't know, you're missing out. Billy Halleck is an overweight lawyer who hits a gypsy with his car after his wife distracts him with oral sex, which is a good reason to run over a gypsy. Given Halleck's influence in town and a general prejudice against gypsies, he manages to brush the incident under the rug with some unethical legal help from his associates, the police chief and the local judge. However, the victim's father, Tadzu Lemke, places a curse on Billy and his associates.
And invites him to a very large Greek wedding later.
Yeah. Billy starts to lose weight at an alarming rate. The judge's skin turns lizard-like, and the police chief develops leprosy. As his two associates are driven mad by their conditions, dying in violent ways, and Billy's wife starts to cheat on him with the local doctor, he flees and enlists the help of a mob enforcer he once defended, the aforementioned Joe Mantegna. The mob man and Billy attack the gypsy camp, kill one of the brood, and eventually threaten the granddaughter of the old man, drawing him out to meet with Billy. He cuts Billy's hand and places his blood and the curse in a delicious strawberry pie and tells Billy to either eat it himself and die quicker or pass it on to someone else. Billy decides to set a trap and feed it to his wife, which he does, and she dies in a great special effects scene. However, his teenage daughter also eats the pie. Grief-stricken, Billy fixes himself a plate of the cursed confection and is happily surprised to see the cheating doctor drop by for a visit. Presumably, Billy feeds him the pie, and they all die.
I mean, like, the whole town, they're going to be traumatized from this when they find, like, the doctor, him, and the wife, and that gruesome death at their home, and then whatever friend that daughter is playing with, like, she's just going to turn into bloody mush as they play soccer. I mean, it's wow.
She's gonna turn into that pie filling.
Yeah, really, that's what it looks like it does. It turns you to the pie filling, but we'll get into that.
Before we start, should we address the fact that people now consider the word gypsy to be a racial slur?
Yes, let's do that because we are going to say that word a lot here because it's not. But I've never thought of it as one. I mean, is there a preferred term? I don't understand where that comes from.
The preferred term is Romani. Because they are the Romani people, apparently.
That makes sense.
Although I'd argue that most of the gypsies we have in America are just Americans who live in trailers.
Right. I mean, yeah. They do that, and they have accepted a lifestyle that is closer to the Romani. But I've never had a problem with the gypsy. Look, like gypsy curses, that's right in the Buffy verse for me. So I'm down. I'm like, yeah, sure, I can totally buy this. Gypsy curse sets your plot in motion. But I mean, all of that sounds fun to me. The biggest problem I have with this film is like I mentioned before, of all of these characters, I don't know who I'm supposed to root for except for the mob thug, which I do want to talk about in a minute. But let's do our run through the cast here real quick because this movie's pretty straightforward. Yeah.
I thought your big problem was going to be with our main character's ridiculous fat suit.
Well, the effects in this movie are horrible, except for that last one with the wife. You're right, and I will pick on that, but I always say this about Stephen King movies, good or bad. There's always something about the characters to talk about that, you want to notice and do things with. I mean, that's the crux of his stories. And The problem with this one, and I don't know how it is in the book, you can tell me, is I don't know who to root for. Does it come off that way in the book? How different is the book versus this?
It's been a long time since I've read the book, but what I basically remember is it's about the same. There's nobody to root for except for possibly the mobster.
And see, that may be the problem with this whole deal, is we've written ourselves in a hole as we go. But let's talk about our main character, Billy Halleck. So calling this guy fat is like insulting fat guys. So, I mean, this dude is morbidly overweight, right? Like, and it is the worst looking fat suit since maybe Big Mama's, or before maybe Big Mama's house, right? Like, it's bad, and the seams are so easy to see.
Billy Halleck is, of course, played by Robert John Burke, who everyone remembers from RoboCop 3. And you and I were talking off air about how sad it is that it seems like this guy's always stuffed inside some ridiculous suit to do his acting.
Some ridiculous piece of badly put together plastic. So,
yeah, it's either foam rubber or it's that hard, like, modeling foam.
He's also tasked with doing voices that he can't do. Like, he sounds the same. I mean, we didn't sound like he's from Maine at all, which I'm sort of glad he's not trying to affect some weird accent. But I don't know. He has this weird kind of, I don't know, like he's on a third-rate game show host delivery with every line. It's so, I don't know how to describe it other than that. It's very weird.
Yeah, I think I don't know. I think it's because he was born in like Queens, so he probably had to work to get rid of the Queens accent, and that's just what he came up with.
Yeah, it would have been better had he sounded like Joe Montana. So because who just does what he is. I mean, he's from Chicago, but he can sound like he's from New York. He sounds like I think the man's made a living off of playing gangsters for the most part. He's played good guys. He's been on Criminal Minds for years, so I guess he's been a good cop now for a long time. But, I know him from that. But I don't know. Poor Robert John Burke. He's not served well by the script here. And he's also not served by the fact that he can turn his head about like Michael Keaton in those Batman movies, it looks like. The way that they've got that thing sculpted around his face. I mean, it's bad.
Yeah, I noticed that. I noticed that he wasn't moving his head, but when he had to turn to look at somebody, he moved his whole body.
Right. He looked like the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man at one point. Like it was a flesh-colored one. Like it was really, really odd.
Yeah, and that's even before we get to the terrible shower scene.
Oh, God, yeah, the worst shower scene ever. Like that's another reason we know this movie fails. They put the wrong person in the shower scene. You got Kari Wurr in this movie, and you don't put her in that. So,
yeah, and she'd have done it for an extra like $5,000.
Yeah. So I mean, come on. I love Kari. She's a bad actress and gives a terrible performance every time she's asked to in films. But she's gorgeous and fun to look at, and generally will play with it and go with that. I mean, I consider her a genre actress all the way, and her accent here is also terrible. But we got to meet the rest of Billy's family here, because you've got this shrew of a wife, Heidi Halleck, played by Lucinda Jenny, who I don't know from anything else. Have you ever heard of her?
No, I actually know the daughter more than...
Yeah, One Tree Hill, right? I mean, that's her.
Right. But this mom, this Lucinda Jenny, I have no idea what she's been in.
Yeah, when I saw the credit come up, I had a moment. I'm like, is that Allison Jenny? Are they related? Apparently not. It's not that, but I would have almost rather it had been her, because this is a horrible, hard to get behind person. Like, at no time is she remotely sympathetic to her very successful rich husband.
At no time does she come across like a human being.
No, she's an alien.
Yeah, it's like the Richard Ayoade character from The Watch, that Neighborhood Watch movie where he's an alien trying to act human.
Yeah.
It's all a little wrong. Yeah, that's kind of like that.
She's almost like Jane Curtin without the cone head. That's how she feels,
That's a good one.
And I would have rather had Dan Aykroyd and Jane Curtin. I bet they would have done this for $5,000 at the time.
And you would have had to put Aykroyd in a fat suit. He could have just
been himself. That's the thing about this, and I had misremembered because again I'd only seen this once before, but I thought at some point we actually got to see the real Robert John Burke. I don't know that there's any time he's not wearing some piece of latex in this movie in one way or another to shade him up or down. Like it's disturbing.
I can only think of one part, like one scene where he looks about normal, and that's when. But even when he's like, even when I don't believe he's wearing any like applications, like any latex stuff, it still looks like they're dressing him to make him look fat. It's when he's supposedly like in the 200-pound range.
Yeah.
But he still looks like, all right, let's hide him in a bulky sweater, kind of thing.
Yeah, he's always wearing clothes that are too big, and I think they're trying to play it for it. You know, he's losing weight so fast he can't keep up with how he looks. And then when he goes on the lam, I guess they don't even try to, maintain what he's looking like or whatever. But then he does that whole shirt reveal where he's uber thin, and that's clearly, let's put your head on one of those little mannequin things. It's bad look all the way around. But I guess we get to what is my favorite character, and I kind of think it may be yours too. Richie the Hammer Ginelli, Joe Mantegna. What can you say? I mean, again, one of my favorite, quote, gangster actors of all time, but I just like Joe Mantegna's presence. He always is such a one to play as a ham and just kind of goes with whatever's in front of him, like he doesn't care. And I appreciate actors that are aware enough to just go, whatever, and they just play what they're supposed to. Like he's fun to me. Like I don't know what, I guess he committed some kind of hit or crime or whatever, and they ended up getting off. Yeah,
it was a contract. He had a contract out on that guy that he was
right.
In the first scene, in the courtroom scene.
Yeah, have you ever seen The Juror with Alec Baldwin and Demi Moore?
Yes.
It's like he's the cousin of the teacher, except he's a lot smarter and doesn't get overly involved with the people that he turns or something. He comes off that way, but more comedic. That's the thing. This film is not supposed to be, and it doesn't play itself as such. But I did find it, funny because it's so over the top.
Well, between Joe Mantegna basically talking in his Fat Tony voice and Robert John Burke making bug eyes at everything, it's hard not to laugh. Especially when he supposedly, after he gets the cursed pie, which we'll get to eventually, and he started to put his malicious plot into place, he looks like a high school student trying to be in play the McMurphy part in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest.
Yeah, that's good. I think the only other person here that seems to be having any fun with their role is probably Michael Constantine. To me, the dad from My Big Fat Greek Wedding, but another character actor well-known, Tedzu Limke. And I think you did a better version of the accent in the name there of the Romanian gypsy. But what a horrible fright wig they put this poor man in. And he's got this horrible thing on his nose, and he's supposed to be 140 or whatever. And
106 years old, yeah.
Yeah, something like that. And he's just creeping around, and he's the one that puts the curses on everyone. But I thought, boy, this guy, clearly is like, you want me to play this awful piece of garbage? Okay. And so he just goes with it. It's almost like they feed him a line before they turn the camera on, and you just get what take you get out of him.
I don't think he was bad, though. I think he was, ridiculous. I think that was more the spirit that this movie needed. Between him and Joe Mantegna and some of what Robert John Burke is doing, they seem to get that this is a goofy piece of junk.
Yeah.
But RoboCop doesn't do it consistently. It's like he tries to be serious in the scenes with the terrible wife and the daughter. But then when Joe Mantegna shows up, he's like, all right, I got to start chewing some scenery or this guy's just going to leave me behind.
And he does every time he fails at it, by the way. That's because I don't think anybody else in this film can act besides Joe Mantegna. I think he's by far the best performer of all of them and isn't in it enough. That's the problem, is neither Limke or Ginelli are in this enough for me to really, hold on to them, because we spend so much time with Billy.
And we're so distracted by Billy's family drama.
That and his weight loss and all that stuff. All of these things are happening, and I just can't. It's like I can't get into the rest of the film because the central piece of it is bloody awful. It really is, and I don't know. I had a real hard time with it. And we have to talk about our remaining characters here. I don't have much to say about the judge and the chief. They're both guys that you see in a lot of other things too. They're just kind of flubs.
we can talk about how the chief, Mr. Daniel von Bargen, the late Daniel von Bargen, excuse me, is like the homeless man's version of Michael Ironside.
Yeah, he does kind of look that way. You're right. I think he's been in other Stephen King stuff too, if memory serves. Like I don't think this was his first round in King Land. I can't remember what else he would have been in, but he just looks like one of these character actors that you see in stuff like this all the time.
He was in Super Troopers.
I've never seen that, so that's new to me. But I'll take your word for it on that one. So, not a Farrelly Brothers guy, not my kind of comedy. So
they're not. It's not the Farrelly Brothers, but
I thought that was. See, that tells you what I know. So.
No, he's been he plays the heavy when you can't get Michael Ironside because he's shooting something else in Canada.
In other words, he plays the heavy when you can't get a real heavy because he's not remotely heavy in this film at all. So I'll tell you who also is not remotely heavy is the gorgeous and always terribly acting Kari Wurr here. Last seen on film strip in Hellraiser Deader, which I think is the 7th or 8th one in that series. I can't remember exactly. Maybe the 6th one. I don't know. It's been a while since Nick and I did that series, but yeah, her best work probably was on Remote Control, and it's just been all downhill since. But I can say I always like seeing her because she is very pretty, and she's she's a genre actress who plays it up. I mean, it's a terrible accent. It's a terrible part. And I don't know, my favorite part maybe where she's running through the county fair with a slingshot after the ever shrinking Billy, and threatening. And then she eventually gets him with one of those things and puts it through his hand. I'm like, man, that's a heck of a rubber band she's got on that thing.
Yeah. Anytime you see her with the slingshot or ululating, it's usually gonna be a good time. But she was in a great terrible science fiction movie shot in beautiful South Africa called Fatal Conflict.
Haven't seen that one.
A hot piece of garbage. She's a space pilot of some sort, and apparently space pilots don't wear bras. So that's good to know.
I think that's a requirement.
But the whole setup of that movie, which is more interesting than Thinner, is a meteorite made of gold crashes into Antarctica and destroys the global economy.
How the heck was that not a Leprechaun sequel? I mean, that sounds like one even. So how did they miss that? Maybe it was, and they couldn't get Warwick Davis that time around or something.
Yeah, they replaced Warwick Davis with Miles O'Keefe, Ator the Flying Eagle himself.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That sounds way more interesting than this, because all Kari Wurr gets to do in this one is be sexually objectified and act like she can hear it from a window and a mile away, do the weird skirt dance, call a guy a pig, and spit and do a bad accent, and then shoot that slingshot a lot, right? Like, that's sort of her thing.
Well, she didn't call him a pig, she called him a pig.
It's a cast of oddball character actors in a very hard to root for anybody kind of movie. And now you've read the book, so I want to ask you a book question here or whatever. Is the entire cast as unlikable on the page as they are on the screen, or is that strictly a function of the very bad choices being put on film here?
It's a great question. I think they were all kind of unlikable. I mean, excuse me, in the book it's more clear that they make it pretty clear that he basically just runs over this gypsy because he's not paying attention, which they also do in the movie. So fundamentally, your main character is super unlikable. The wife is one of the great poorly written Stephen King characters of all time because she's just as bad. I don't remember there being the affair subplot, but it was probably there. He's got a thing for cuckoldry. And, the only character who's remotely interesting is Richie the Hammer.
Wow.
Just like on screen. And he also does repugnant things. So he's not as likable on the page. He's a lot more likable in Joe Mantegna's hands.
Oh yeah, I think he can transform a character like that completely. Does the accident happen the same way though? I mean, basically he gets Richie the Hammer off. They have a big, celebratory lunch on his yacht, and he's like, "I'll always owe you one." And so you realize that's Chekhov's thug, that can get called in back into the third act to provide help. And then they go out for a big celebratory dinner with the partners in the firm or whatever, and he eats a ton of stuff, and his wife basically gives him a combination hand job BJ on the way home, and that's how he hits the gypsy lady who I had always thought was the old man's wife. No, it's his daughter. So that sets up how old he is. I guess that's what that needed to be.
Yeah, the whole point of that is that he's a million years old.
Right.
That's the only purpose that character served.
Right, but that's why he hits her, is because he's, naturally distracted by those activities. Is that pretty much it, too, in the book, or did you just not pay attention to what he's doing?
He's also, they're more clear that he's pretty drunk in the book. They kind of skirt over it here, but, I mean, he's definitely had too much to drink in either case, I think.
Yeah, they do talk about the fact that he's supposed to have taken a breathalyzer, and the chief lies about it on the stand and all of that stuff. But it's not. It wasn't clear to me that he was hammered. It was just that he was really full, and his wife was pleasuring him beneath the Lincoln steering wheel.
Yeah, let's not think about that anymore.
It was really weird. But anyway, to each their own.
Oh, I mean, one good thing is that actress was in no danger of being anywhere near real genitals.
Yeah, that suit
of the ridiculous. That's definitely like a full body fat suit from like thighs from like knees to shoulders, basically.
Oh yeah, and then he's got the face, on too, which high definition transfer does not help this at all. Like it makes it look even worse and more. You can just see the seams so bad on it that I don't know. It looks terrible. But he hits the woman, and you do get one of the gross effect shots. I think Tom Holland is always good for these when you need one. Is he's basically running the windshield wipers and washing her blood and guts off of the windshield. And I thought, man, that reminded me of like Driver's Ed. All of a sudden, those awful films they showed us in Driver's Ed. It looked like that, like blood flows red on the highway.
Yeah, blood on the asphalt or whatever. That was one of my favorite shots, and that was one of the most Tom Hollandy feeling moments.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah,
that extra little splatter of blood that's unnecessary but fun. Although it was probably necessary to give this movie an R rating. I mean, you probably could.
I don't know about that. I mean, the subject matter alone is very R. I mean, you've got sexually explicit content. You've got a good bit of language. A lot of macabre murder. I mean, I think, especially in the mid-90s, the MPAA, I think this would have been an R. Plus, the words Stephen King's on anything is almost always an R. I mean, I don't know that he's ever had a PG-13 film adaptation. Maybe so, but I certainly don't remember it. So, I think this was destined to be an R the whole way.
That's fair.
And I mean, I couldn't see that this wouldn't appeal to. I can't even see this appealing to your usual slasher crowd, which is probably why this movie failed, greatly. Because if you watch the trailers for it, that's sort of how it's marketed. Is this slasher, from the great horror writer, and then this slasher veteran director. You get this awful, ugly tale about not taking responsibility as an adult. I mean, that's what the whole theme of this is, right? Is these adults that refuse to take responsibility for their actions, and these people from the quote old world who do things the old way and have honor and dignity even though they're awful and repugnant.
Right. Yeah. But let's not forget, they're not doing these to people. They're doing this to gypsies.
Right.
They're subhuman. They're like,
Yeah, can we talk about the town's completely awful reaction? Like, these people set up in the town square, they're playing with the kids, they're doing their carnival thing, and it is as if you've dropped the pariah of society on top of this poor little town. Like, they are people walking by just in disgust constantly, and I think that's supposed to set us up to like the gypsy.
Here's my question though. We're both in the South. have you ever seen like real live gypsies?
No.
Like, if gypsies have never rolled through anywhere I've lived. I've seen Amish people. I've seen Mennonites. I know the difference between the two. I've never like seen a Romani gypsy, whatever PC term you want to use for them, caravan. I've never known anybody who was like, oh, I'm prejudiced against gypsies. You
No,
know,
me either,
That
yeah.
seems like such a European conceit.
Yeah, and I don't know how that plays in New England. Like, maybe that is more that way, like the way we would look at other groups here in the South or something like that. I don't know, Ron, because I was thinking the same thing. I was like, why are these? But with the European influence of New England and also just the more progressive bend of the people up there and things, you think they wouldn't care, you know, like most people just leave you alone kind of thing. And it would be different if they had set up something that this clan of people was doing something like really bad in town. Like all they were doing was just being different and they just shunned them for that. But the problem is that, and here's the funny thing about it, is that these people are all the same color. It's white people hating on other white people that just speak with bad accents. I mean, that's what it is. I mean, it's not, there's no racial tension. If I'm supposed to get that out of this, well, I really don't.
Yeah, they looked. They make a big deal about the white man from town, but they just looked like white men.
The white man from town. So, I mean, that was a bad WCW promo waiting to be cut. That's all that was.
Yeah, they just hired Vito the Skull Grosso or somebody. We're going to rebrand him as the white man from town.
That does sound like something that would have been done in the bad WCW days. But
well, I think they did that with Kurt Hennig when they made him a redneck.
Yeah, that's true. That would have been it. So, anyway, I could talk about bad wrestling all day because it's way more interesting than this movie. That's the problem. So I don't get it either. But they're awful to the gypsies or whatever. They have the fun of the way home. He gets out of it it's not even a case. It's like an arbitration in a small room. You know, like he totally uses the system, and I'm going, well, that's what you would expect, right? And he gets off with it, but then the old man does the touch thing and thinner.
But it doesn't even feel like he's really getting away with that much because it's not a trial. It's just it's not a trial, honey. It's a coroner's inquest. I'm Robert John Burke. I was in RoboCop.
I'm very stiff for two reasons. So I'm stiff in this suit and my acting is stiff. So yeah, I don't get it either. I mean, it's a weird portrayal and it's a weird scene, but I get it too in the sense that it's him. We're supposed to believe that this is his way of manipulating the system because he can finagle it so that he doesn't even, I mean, they say later he doesn't even get points on his license for this, you know, so, but none of that really is explained. I just have to assume it, you know, and I'm supposed to assume this guy's a bit of an under the table lawyer anyway, because he got a mob guy off and all of that. And he's just sort of like, oh, I'm just doing what I'm supposed to do. I'm entitled to a good defense, you know? And so he gets out of it, whatever. And then we get the curse with the word, right? And that sets into the string of events, the awful shower scene after the racquetball club, which I'm like, wow, this guy would have dropped dead from that kind of activity nonetheless anyway. And I'm sorry, I mean, that would have been very bad for him. And poor Robert John Burke probably was miserable trying to do this. And let's talk about the awkward shower scene, because I think you said it best when we were talking offline about it. It's so funny to watch this poor actor try to avoid the water seeping into the seams of that suit, right?
Oh, yeah, because he's clearly not standing in any way a normal person has ever showered. He's definitely not standing in the shower the way a fat person stands in a shower, because I know that one. But he's close to the water, but he's as far away from the water as he possibly can, and he's making sure it's only hitting like the back of the back fat plate of his suit.
I remember one of the dorms I lived in when I was in college, the shower nozzle hit me dead center, like right below my sternum. because I'm about 6'2", and the floor I lived on used to be a women's dormitory when it was built, so it was not built for people that are 6'2", and so for years, like, I had this one spot on me that I felt like no hair was ever going to grow back, and when I got moved out after I graduated and stuff, the shower head was above me, and I was like, oh, for the first time ever, So I mean, I understood. That's what it reminded me of too. But he's so trying to stay away from it, and you see this little weird patch on the judge's skin, about in the same spot I'm talking about, that's supposed to be like psoriasis or something like that. And what we find out later is he's getting turned into a lizard. And I do want to talk about that scene with his wife because, wow. But those
I would also like to talk about that makeup job on him later.
Yeah, we will talk about the shifting makeup, which I feel like is several scenes cut together by somebody in the MPAA, making something work there. But we'll get into that in a minute. But no, I mean, Billy starts to change drastically. Like, he loses 14 pounds in a week, and all we ever see this dude do is like stuff his face with the product placement of all time: Pepsi, Diet Pepsi, Ruffles potato chips. He's eating
Doritos.
The name, Doritos, like and not only Doritos, Cool Ranch Doritos. So I mean, he's
they are the Dorito choice of fat people everywhere.
He's eating all of this bad stuff, but he keeps dropping weight by the ton, and it's his wife is like tracking it on this archaic computer program. I don't know what that was. That early Excel. That's kind of what it looked like.
It looks like a Microsoft or like a Windows 3.1 kind of system.
Yeah, that would make sense because that was my freshman year of college. That's why it looked so familiar to me. So I had seen that somewhere.
Or like the OS 8, the Apple OS 8.
Very true. So it was awful, but she's like worried about him. Like, you need to go see the doctor, and so we meet the doctor, right? Who he refers to constantly as Dr. Mikey. And this guy is such a sleaze. I'm like, he should have been one of Richie the Hammer's like goons or something. He doesn't come off like a doctor, except maybe in a Head and Shoulders commercial kind of way.
He looks like he should have been on LA Law.
Yeah, as one of the people that they defeat, Yeah. So, or one of the guest stars that McCoy and Jill, what's her name, run over on Law and Order, and back in the original Law and Order days. Like, he looks like one of those kind. Not your family physician in the small town, Doc Hollywood style.
Here's a great question. We talked about the Doritos product placement, and how do you think Doritos feels about being associated with morbid obesity? And more importantly, how do you think Doritos enjoy being associated with a movie where a man eats in the most disgusting way I've ever seen anyone eat?
I don't know how they got the clearance for that, or if there was indeed like product placement. I couldn't find anything about it on the net. I can't imagine any company, particularly in the mid 90s to the late 90s, when they would have been more hip to what was going on out there, signing up to be a part of this piece of crap. Like, there's no way. Like, in the 80s, the early 80s, when SeaWorld signed up to be part of Jaws 3, I mean, they thought that was going to be a great idea to show murder inside of their water park. They didn't realize, what they were getting into. But there's no excuse. So part of me thinks that this is just they got clearance for all this stuff somehow, offering something on the back end. I don't know. Maybe that's. I mean, Pepsi's been known to be a part of a lot of films. Nick and I talked about this on the Twister retro series, that they were just a part of all kinds of badly made movies. So maybe this was part of their move, but why Doritos and Ruffles got involved, I don't know. But I mean, we have everything in there. Like, it's just a junk food palooza.
And it's not just the things he's eating, it's the way he's eating them. He tears into every meal like it is going to be his last meal.
Right. It's like he has been starving for days and he can't eat enough. And I almost feel like if that had been part of the curse and they had explained that would have been good to know, that not only do you lose weight at a rapid, click, but it also makes your appetite voracious. Like, you cannot get enough to eat. And that's what drives you, so ultimately you lose all this weight and you go away, or you just rot yourself to pieces because of the way, the bad choices you make in eating or whatever. I don't know. I don't know. There needed to be more to explain there. Goodness knows they don't explain anything in this movie. Like, I have to do so much work for this movie. It drives me crazy. I need something to key off of here.
Well, they did mention at some point that he says it's a race and I'm losing as he's shoveling chicken bones or something into his mouth. But even before he gets his thinner curse, he's just like throwing down like in a ridiculous manner at every meal. I don't know if that's a choice or if it's like, I don't know. It almost feels like Tom Holland is like, yeah, he's a fat pig. Eat faster, eat more. Just slop it around there, because he's leaving big messes everywhere he goes too.
Yeah, I would hate to have to clean up after the dude, in public or private. Like, it's bad the way that he just mauls the food that's around him at all times, and it's very off-putting as well. Like, I don't know. I realize that's what we're supposed to get from the guy. This is who he is, and this is why he's so disgusting or whatever. But it makes it hard to root for the character when you make him so repugnant.
Right, and it also, once again, I feel bad for Robert John Burke, because who knows how many takes he has to shoot, like shoveling corn cobs into his mouth or whatever he's doing.
Yeah, I mean, it's the chicken scenes, like you mentioned earlier, those are awful. And any dinner scene when he's running around with his wife and daughter at the house or whatever. Yeah, there's always some just bloody terrible thing that he's involved in.
And the worst part is it all looks cold. Like, it all looks ice cold.
Yeah, that may be the worst, is that it's so it's just like right out of the fridge. Like, look, who hasn't gone and done the cold pizza fried chicken every now and then? Sure, but like, not for the whole meal. Like, that's just it's just really off-putting again.
Yeah, you're not eating cold. Nobody eats cold corn on the cob.
Yeah, except the parents in War Games, because that's how you get all the great nutrients. So apparently from that mom. And I'm topping my random references from 80s films tonight, by the way. But that's the only person that would do something like that. Like, yeah, I don't get it. It's very odd, but again, it's just putting us off of this. But we meet the doctor, we don't like him. They start setting up the stuff with the wife and him nagging, and then he goes over to the judge's house to visit the judge because he's trying to figure out, do you believe in a gypsy curse? Is there a gypsy curse? He's asked people about gypsy curses. They all think he's crazy. And the scene he has with this wife is, you talk about playing it way out of the park. This actress is nuts this whole time about what's going on. I mean, she plays it like she's half drunk, which I think she's supposed to be as a character anyway, but I think she may have been on the set. And it is out of this world how frantic she gets.
Yeah, she definitely goes from right to 100 and stays there the whole time. And like everyone else in this movie, she doesn't know like what she's doing or what the whole purpose is. It just feels like they told Tom Holland, just pull her aside and said, all right, you're just completely insane. She'll just start jabbering.
I mean, yeah, she runs all this exposition dialogue about it's not a skin condition. He's not at the Mayo Clinic for skin cancer. I know it's something worse. He's a scale. He's got a forked tongue and he's got yellow eyes and clawed hands. And I mean, like, I expected if we saw this guy again to see the lizard from Spider-Man, right? Like, that's exactly what I was expecting to come rolling out in that car later on. But that's he looks more like the Crypt Keeper's friend in those Tales from the Crypt movies we reviewed a few years ago.
That's right. He looks like the cartoon drawing of like psoriasis on those like super like extra intensive care lotion commercials. How it's all gray.
Yeah.
And it's got the bright red cracking in it. That's what he looks like.
Yeah, he's just falling apart, literally just a piece by piece. It's it's supposed to be, again, grotesque body horror. I think that's what they're trying to get Tom Holland to do. But it fluctuates so rapidly. I mean, let's jump ahead to his last scene is when he shows up to pick it's either a dream or it actually happens and we just don't realize what's going on. But it fluctuates from just being like gray mummy cake to, like you're describing, this alligator skin peeling off stuff with red dye underneath it.
It depends on if it's the stunt man or the actor.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that's exactly what the difference is there. So it's very, I don't know, again, very weird and odd. But before we see him, though, we get to go visit the old chief of police who, it said in the plot summary, we wrote down, he's suffering from leprosy. Either that or a hella bad bee sting on the right side of his face, right? Like that's what it looks like is wrong with him.
Another actor cursed to wear ridiculous latex.
I think they all are in this movie. I think that's how, like, that had to be part of the contract. You will wear ridiculous latex.
I mean, even Michael Constantine has that weird boil on his nose.
Yeah, I mean that's like part of the MacGuffin of the whole movie too, is that he was in the with the Stephen King cameo there in his Stan Lee moments, where he must appear in a film now, and he plays the pharmacist to get this thing from my nose, and it's it goes from a boil to just a pimple or something. It looks like that you'd watch on some grotesque YouTube video.
Yeah, it's definitely Dr. Pimple Popper.
Yeah, exactly. So, but no, the police chief is like trying to hand him a gun and like, you go get him and you kill him for us because this is we lied and this is what we got, and we hear a shot in the distance and assume that the chief has killed himself here, right? And that's what the
But here's my question: did he do it left-handed?
Yeah, that's what I wanted to know. Yeah,
his right hand his fingers were too fat to pull the trigger.
Had to have done it. I guess being a police officer, he's trained in ambidextrous weaponry or something. So I don't know. So maybe he lifted a toe up. I don't know. Maybe he's into yoga. I don't know. But yeah, I mean, we don't know. It's not like they ever. I mean, they give us a shot later at the house where the cops are doing the work of the autopsy crew or whatever. But yeah, we never know.
Yeah, they don't tell us the things we want to know.
Yeah, no, it's just all the useless information you don't care about. So and
if you want to find out if Italians believe in gypsies, well,
yeah, this is how you. This is how you will find out. So Billy goes on this quest to find the old man now, and his wife is like trying to get him committed, right? Like he finds out from some friend that has seen the gypsies leave town that his wife has put out, the wife and the doctor have put out some kind of almost a wanted thing on him to have him involuntarily committed, and so he goes on the lam while all this is going down. He pays off the dude at the dock, and he keeps hunting them until he finally comes upon their camp, right? And he's at this point he's called Richie the Hammer to say, I might need your help, but not yet. So we introduced that. So because we'd forgotten about him, he's at a bar with a couple of women, which looks like it's shot in a houseboat somewhere. But and maybe that's what it's supposed to look like. But
maybe it was the houseboat that he was having his Italian dinner on.
That could have been it. Maybe it was. Yeah, they did set up that boat thing, that yacht that he's hanging out on. So he's on Coughlin's yacht from Cocktail, and they're doing that. And he goes to the gypsies and he at first he's like, why don't you do this to me? And they tell him, you killed my daughter, blah blah blah. And Corey Ward's aiming the slingshot at him, about to kill him or hit him with it again. And, I should have known that, like, slingshots can be really deadly. Apparently she's got, like, heavy ball bearings in those things, because she hits him in the hand with one, and it's like he gets his hand shot by a shotgun. I mean, that's probably the best effect in the movie is the hand shot. Like, it goes straight through and everything.
And later when he's looking through the hole in his hand.
Right, yeah, which, we haven't seen that before. And now I know where Robert Rodriguez and Quentin Tarantino ripped that off from Dusk Till Dawn. Of course, that's been done a million times before. It's not just them. If you've ever seen the Sam Raimi Western, The Quick and the Dead, with Sharon Stone and Russell Crowe, there's a good through-the-hand shot in that one, too. So, and a lot of through-the-body, bullet wound shots. So, maybe someday. You're a fan of Westerns. We might have to do that just on principle for being both a terrible film and a and a Western at the same time. But anyway, Billy goes from being like belligerent to like begging for mercy, and they're like, away with you, in the great Count Chocula voice there. And then he gets mad, and he goes on that rant that we talked about, the white man from town rant. And I have to tell you, I was physically like bellowing in my chair at how ridiculous all this was.
Even just thinking about it makes me start laughing. It's great. I love what it is.
Yeah, I mean, it is a bad promo of all time. It's terrible.
Yeah, that's a Vince Russo special right there.
Exactly. It's right in his alley. And he does this, the white man town will bring the curse on you all. And what I'm sitting there going like, he's going to go call his thug friend. Like, that's what white men do, right? You call your friend in a low place when you've got trouble. So, and look, Garth was right. Sometimes you need a few of those. And he's got one in places so low you couldn't even find, right? And so Richie, is like, oh, you should have called me in a long time ago, Billy. And he's like packing in, he brings in one of his local thugs, and he's packing in all this, heavy hardware. And I love the attack on the gypsy camp. Can I tell you? Like, I had a blast watching one man with a machine gun take down a whole camp of people, but not kill any of them. It was like a very sanitized Rambo attack.
It was a RoboCop 3 scene.
Yes, yeah. Everybody gets shot to pieces like G.I. Joe, but only one person gets shot, and that's the gypsy granddaughter's husband, right? Like,
that's not even the Hammer's fault. The gypsies shoot him.
Yeah, exactly. Like, he doesn't even get shot by the Hammer. Like, the Hammer blows up vehicles. It doesn't hit a soul this whole time.
Yeah, apparently you can, if you fire enough bullets into a propane tank, you get a really cool explosion.
I think the Mythbusters have disproven that at least 4 or 5 times. So is that you have to create such a spark off of it to make that work. But he did have an.
You have to shoot up like a 58 Cadillac then.
Yeah, exactly. Well, now that blowing up, I could totally buy, because he did have an AK-47. So, those bullets known to tumble just a bit. So, but yeah, I like the Richie shootout, and again, all this goes down, and what I love too is that he dresses up like an FBI agent, or like his character from years later in Criminal Minds, to go and investigate and find out what's going on and what's the motivation still of all the gypsies, because he's going to lure out the granddaughter, right? That's how they're going to finally get the old man to meet with Billy and agree to his terms.
Right, and that was one of my favorite moments in the movie, if only because it shows that he's actually like the only clever person in the room.
Oh yeah,
he's just like, look, these people aren't smart. I'll wear a suit. I'll show them a badge I got at the dollar store. She'll come with me. She don't know any better. And lo and behold, it happens, and then he throws soda pop and baking soda in her face.
Right, and then puts the, quote, real acid on her forehead.
Did you notice when she knocked the real acid away, she knocked it towards her body?
My wife said the same thing. She's like, wouldn't you knock that behind your head? And I was like, yeah, that's what I was just thinking, is she threw it the wrong way. And all I could think was, Kari Word did that one time too many, and was like, you're just going to go with it, Tom. I'm done. So I'm not going to keep doing this. So they finally got it to sit on her forehead just right or something. I don't know. Like, I was actually sitting there thinking, like, could I balance a cup like that on my forehead, or is it too round? Peyton Manning could with his 5-story forehead now. But Kari Word not known for having a huge head, so I don't know.
Well, I mean, she might. We don't know what she would look like after taking all that HGH.
This is true.
But yeah, I that's the first time I've watched this movie several times for God knows what reason, and that's the first time I've ever noticed that she knocked the acid in the wrong way. The acid that is clearly flat Pepsi.
Yeah, very flat Pepsi, which oddly enough acts like an acid if you let it go flat. That's the irony of that drink, because you leave it in a cup long enough and it'll cut through like alien blood, oddly enough. But yeah, I love that that's how they draw it out. And this is also, we get Richie like actually involved, because not only is he mad because of what they're doing to his friend William, who he's the only one that calls him William. Everybody else calls him Billy in the movie. But his thug gets cut up and sent back to him in a car with a message. And I'm like, when did the Romanian gypsies start sending off like Sicilian messages, with a fish in a newspaper or whatever?
Maybe that's why the mom knows, Richie the Hammer's mom knows so much about gypsies.
Maybe that could be it, right? Yeah, she does have the one scene to say, yeah, that could totally work, because she's the part of the cast that confirms for us that this is real.
Yeah, she's our grandmother / expert in the supernatural. Because I think all movies were required to have that at some point.
It's either you have the magical black man or you have the magical grandmother. And I think she's the magical grandmother in this case, right? That's the character she's asked to play in that one scene. But the Hammer, gets his way. Billy finally gets to meet with the old man, but not before we find out later what happens to poor Richie. And this is what I hate. We don't even get to see it on screen what happens to him. He gets his hand cut off and put in a car, right? I guess did Kari Work catch up with him? Like, how did that happen?
I don't know, because I had forgotten that actually happened to Richie. I guess because I want that character to be the only one to live. The only one to, escape unscathed.
Right.
So, I think in the book he just gets, killed by the gypsies.
Wow, so they don't even set it up beyond that.
Not that I remember. That doesn't mean it doesn't happen.
Well, it obviously doesn't leave much of an impression. And that's another thing, too. You've got your most fun character, I'll say. Now, maybe not most likable, because it's hard to say anybody like that's likable. But the most fun character, we don't even get to see his death on screen. I'm like, this movie can't do anything right. Like, you have to show us him being, awfully tortured and her turning the screws on him. Like, that's the only fair way he could go down. And they don't even get that right. That's what I'm complaining about.
Yeah, this movie, I don't know if it's because they didn't want to spend the money, which probably was a wise decision, or they couldn't. After they couldn't get the prosthetic effects to look right, they decided not to bother with any of the other special effects. But everything that you want to see ends up happening off screen.
You're exactly right. Everything you want happens off screen, and that is frustrating.
They don't even show a kennel of dead fake dogs.
No.
He goes in and poisons the dogs, the gypsy fighting dogs, apparently.
Right, we don't get anything out of that. It's just so badly done. But it leads us to this climax, if you want to call it that, right? Of Billy and the gypsy. How did you like this? The way that the old man did the stabbing of the fake hand to put the blood curse into the strawberry pie.
I did enjoy that because it was so unnecessary. Because he's got the bandages aren't dry. The bandages are wet with fresh blood. You don't need to stab him. You just need to squeeze his hand a little bit, and he's gonna leak like a Japanese samurai.
Oh, you're right. I mean, he's just oozing blood. I guess they needed to be fresh though, and not be any of the stuff that goes with the blood at the time. Maybe, I don't know, but it feels that way.
You just wanted to stab him in the hand one last time.
It clearly seems to be that was the whole purpose of the moment, is we have to do that hand. Let's make you more uncomfortable one more time in this movie, right?
And we gotta squirt corn syrup blood all over the top of that latex pie. Yeah,
you're right. And that pie, I think it was its own bubble effect or something, right? That is so poorly executed as a piece. They didn't even have a pie. It looks like one of those fake table serving pies, that you see at the department stores that have the tableware set out. It's one of those fake plastic ones.
Or the ones you see for decoration at restaurants.
Yeah. It's definitely the fake pie in the front of the Korean barbecue place or whatever. It's not the real food that you would be ordering from such an establishment. It's awful. And they get this thing, and so he's got this whole plan though, because he's like, I'm going to go home and feed this to the, I know exactly who I'm giving this curse to, and his whole plan is to feed this to his wife, right? And I guess that's what we want him to do, because she's so unlikable too, that we want him to murder his wife with this evil gypsy curse. But he's given a choice by the old man. It's like, look, your weight loss is going to stop temporarily. You're going to start gaining weight again unless you don't give this away to somebody. But if you want to do what's right, you'll eat it yourself and die with dignity, because you'll die very fast once you eat this pie.
I mean, he should have just said, all right, I'll eat it if you eat it.
Yeah, I mean, can we say too though that the progression of his curse is so very different than the progression of the other guy's curses. Like, the judge turns into a lizard pretty fast and goes insane and drives into, I guess he drives into a truck, or he dreams that he drives into a truck. Billy does.
Billy dreams that he drives into a truck, but he actually does drive into a truck.
Yeah, and I'm like, is he having like cross flashback, or I don't get that.
Connected by cursovision,
psychic. Yeah, it's like they're having Carrie psychic visions in the middle of it. And then the police chief like becomes this hideous, acne monster really quick too. Like, all that happens so fast. But he does have dramatic weight loss, but like, he doesn't turn into nothing immediately. It takes a little time. And I'm like, his is so much more slower working than the other people's. And then for them to drop the bit and realize how quick this pie kills you seemed so different than the rest of the movie.
Well, he did say the pie death was going to be quick and painless.
Right. It's
or something.
Clean. Yeah, clean,
man.
Yeah, let's talk about how clean the death is, though, because he wakes up next to the wife, and she looks like the inside of the pie, right?
Yeah, she is a real splatter slop monster.
Almost Toxic Avenger level, I would say.
Oh, yeah. She definitely fell into a vat of toxic waste. And gained superhuman powers after that.
Oh, yeah, too bad she didn't come back for that, right? Because then or she was the bad, wife at the end of Pet Sematary who's all grossed out. Though that was an incredible makeup effect. This wants to be that. Gosh, it can't even get close to that. So when Denise Crosby's performance blows that away, you've lost as a film. So sorry, Star Trek fans, but that's just the case. So he gets his wish, right? But then the tragic irony of it is that the daughter who he sent away for the night so that he could perform this dastardly act, I wonder how he was ever going to explain this to her, shows up and is like, "Oh, I really loved your pie, Daddy. Thanks. I'm going to go play soccer with my friends. We're all melting to goo in a few hours." And the look on his face, like, "What have I done? What have I done?" And I'm like, "You did what you wanted to, you a-hole. You killed your whole family." So he's going to do the right thing now. He's going to eat the pie himself, only to be coated by this doctor affair that we've shoved into this movie so we can make the wife more unlikable. That, come on in and have some of my pie.
That doctor affair that may or may not be true.
Right. We don't even know if that's... Yeah, you're right. That could just be more of his psychotic delusions. We don't even know if that's the case.
Yeah, but it's not done in such a way that we're either clear it's a delusion or we're clear that it's not. It's very, I don't know. You decide.
I mean, well, think about what this little town has gone through in like 3 weeks, okay? They've had 2 visitors from out of town killed in mysterious circumstances. The police chief committed suicide. The judge drove himself insane and drove his car into a truck or a wall. His wife's off her rocker. The town, fat lawyer has presumably wasted away, and his wife and daughter into some jelly. The local hitman is found dead along with one of his thugs, and the local doctor is dead. Like, this whole town is ready just to close doors and move away, right? They're just going to become a ghost town. Nobody's left.
They're clearly going to have to change the name of this place to Salem's Lot.
Or something. Like, I kept waiting for them to reveal that, like, pie juice got into the water system too, and just took out the whole town eventually. It felt like they were closing the door on everything. It might as well have.
I don't know how many people are still alive in this town at this point.
Not many in that neighborhood. They all seem to live in the same place together, and it's just rough. But it's a rough ending to this film because it's so abrupt. I mean, it's like we do one attack on the gypsies, they agree to your thing, and then your whole turnabout doesn't work. And so it leads me to ask, all of this could have been avoided if he had just, said, I was getting a handy from the wife while driving. The woman walked out in front of me. I didn't see her, and he paid a couple fines. I mean, I don't think he would have been found guilty of anything really severe. I mean, that was... He was distracted. She walked out into traffic. He wasn't speeding. I'm like, but if you just owned up to it, bro, you'd still be fat and happy.
And she was dressed in dark clothes. Let's not.
Yeah, right. So that's what I'm saying. Like the conceit of the film is that if you had just taken the mildest bit of responsibility for anything, Fat Lawyer, you would be okay. But I guess that was the point.
Fat Lawyer sounds like it's going to be a Jim Belushi show on CBS.
Really, it could have been Jim Belushi for all I know, at this point. But yeah, slice it. That would have been in the 90s. Slice it in between like Friends and one of the bad medical shows or whatever they were trying to force out there, or Sunset Strip and all that kind of stuff. But yeah,
I think you could find a home for Fat Lawyer starring Jim Belushi on CBS right now.
Yeah, probably so. So
put it on before a CSI or something, and just roll it out there and. Set it in Chicago.
Yeah, see what happens. Be done with it. Joe Mantegna could be the doctor of the Fat Lawyer.
Although if it's going to be in Chicago, you're going to have to take it to NBC, and it can join in the rest of the Chicago verse. All the other
I know. Yeah, the whole world is in Chicago except for SVU now, which is still in New York somehow. So, but they just had a crossover. So, all of these ideas, by the way, far superior to the film we just reviewed. So, I think I know your answer to this, but what are your final thoughts, recommendations, and popcorn ratings on Thinner?
It's a bad movie. It's dumb as a bag of hammers. It doesn't make sense. It's not particularly stylish or entertaining. But there are so many things that go wrong with it that are just really enjoyable to me. I have to go medium popcorn. I have a weakness for garbage, and this is definitely garbage. Mm. Do not watch it expecting a good movie. Maybe just watch the parts where it's Michael Constantine and Joe Mantegna and Robert John Burke together. That would, if you cut that down, that's one really good episode of like Tales from the Crypt or some new Twilight Zone spinoff.
A good part of Creepshow 3 it could have been,
Yeah, exactly. And you can just leave the parts out where he's like talking to his friends and family and having a wife.
I think this movie is aptly named as Thinner because I think the story is thin. I've never read the book again, but the book material seems like really thin, and I kind of get why Stephen King was like, we're putting that one on the pseudonym. So it's like the idea you can't get out of your head, but you have to finally write it down or else you won't leave it alone. And so he's like, I've got to pick the Gypsy Curse scab and just be done with it, today. And so he banged this out, and then somebody turned it into a movie. This is a terribly executed bad movie. I like garbage movies too, but this one isn't even any fun. I guess the problem is that the fun part of it is only in it for maybe 10 minutes. That's Joe Mantegna. Everything else is horrible, and it's just it's 90 minutes long, and it feels like 2.5 hours. I mean, it's like you're watching one of those bad TV Godfather knockoffs, The Last Don or something like that. It just goes on forever, and I'm kind of glad it does deliver the one thing I want. I wanted everyone gone at the end of this movie. Even the poor daughter, who I'm like, I bet Bethany Joy Lentz and her braces, Sarah Jessica Parker cuteness that she had going on there before becoming hot on One Tree Hill. But yeah, this movie is abhorrent, and to me, it doesn't even do a good job of being a bad movie. It's just a bad movie, badly acted and badly directed, and it's horrible and should be avoided at all costs. So, small popcorn for me. Not the worst Stephen King adaptation. That's a good running list, but you can make a retrospective out of just the bad ones, I think. But it's right up there with some of the worst ones. This is just bad. So can't give it any higher than a small popcorn for me, not this time around. Thanks for joining us on this latest edition of Film Strip. You can find more episodes on the archive section of our website, continuousplaypodcast.com/movies. And, of course, you can always follow Ron's writings over at Den of Geek.
Sir, that's me.
Yeah, what do you got going on right now?
Well, as of the time we're recording, next week Walking Dead will be back.
Ah, yes, The Walking Dead is back. And so you've also been covering Teen Wolf and several other MTV shows, right?
Just Teen Wolf this time.
Just Teen Wolf.
But yeah, I've also got Game of Thrones coming in April and some other stuff to be determined.
Very cool, very cool. So we'll catch up with that for sure, and we'll definitely have you back on as we can go ahead and we've been teasing it out now. You know, this fall is going to be the biggest. This fall is going to be the biggest Shocktober ever because we're doing 2 major horror franchises simultaneously leading up to a crossover at the end. Brian and I are reviewing all of the Nightmare on Elm Street films, but you and I are going to camp. We're doing all of the Friday the 13th films. Then all 3 of us will culminate in Freddy versus Jason, and I can't wait to get into that because I just got a lot to say about Friday the 13th, and I think you do too, so that should be a lot of fun.
Yes, make sure you dust off the VCR for that one because that's the only way to watch Friday the 13th.
If it's not grainy and where you can, do random pauses and watch it jump around with the tracking, you're just not getting the full effect of what those list of those first 4 films we're trying to give you. So, but more on that later on. But we got a long time before that. This is spring. Who knows what else we'll be coming up with? There's several things coming out in theaters we may take a shot at here. There's always look, I've got a personal dustbin pile of films I've bought for $3 at Walmart. So and I know you do too. So we can always come up with that. And hey, I hear they're finally making a movie about The Room with James Franco and a couple other.
Dave Franco.
Yeah, Dave Franco and some other interesting people. So that we may have to get back in and do that because we actually have reviewed The Room before.
It'll be a very funny story.
Indeed. So, and we can even you want to do some bad movies, we can pick some James Franco ones. There's plenty of those to go around. So, folks, thanks again for joining us. Until next time, for Ron, I'm Jay. Thanks for listening to Film Strip.
Thank you for listening to Film Strip. You can find more episodes on our website, continuousplaypodcast.com/movies. Please leave us a positive review on iTunes and link up with us on Facebook. The Film Strip theme music is produced and performed by Frozen Lake 121.